There is growing concern in this country and fear about deadly attacks against transgender Americans, particularly trans women of color. As Amna Nawaz tells us, a series of murders in different cities in just 1 week has underscored a larger pattern of violence over several years. And yet it comes at a time when trans celebrities are more accepted and more prominent in pop culture.
Judy, the most recent killing took place last Sunday in North Philadelphia. Michelle Tamika Washington, 40 years old and a longtime advocate for the LGBTQ community, was shot several times. Her death came 1 day after Malaysia Booker was found dead in Dallas. Booker was just 23, and just weeks before her death, she was attacked in a mob-like beating after a minor traffic accident. 1 week before those murders, 21-year-old Claire Legato was shot in the head in Cleveland. She was killed after an argument between her mother and the suspected shooter. Earlier this year, 2 more Black transgender women, Ashanti Carmen and Dana Martin, were also killed. Last year, more than 24 transgender people were killed. And according to a 2018 Human Rights Campaign report, there were at least 128 trans people killed in 32 states since 2013. 80% of them were people of color. Let's now take a closer look with Beverly Tillery. She's executive director of the Anti-Violence Project, an LGBTQ anti-violence organization. Beverly, welcome to the NewsHour. Thank you for being with us. I want to start by asking you about this recent spate of killings. They happened across the country. The circumstances are all very different in each case. Do you know or believe that these women were targeted because they were transgender?
You know, I don't know all of the specifics of each of these murders, but what we know is, as you really just showed already, that we are seeing a tremendous number of homicides of trans women of color. Over and over for the past several years, this has been consistent, and we need to pay attention as a society. This is something that's happening to our community members who are constantly under threat, experiencing other kinds of hate violence in our society, and we need to step up and come together and really do something to stop it.
Beverly, your organization tracks the numbers. You've been tracking them for 20 years. When you look at the numbers as we know them this year as compared to last, there appears to be a reduction in the violence. Do you trust those numbers?
Well, what we always say is that even what we report, we know is an underreporting of the violence that's happening and the homicides that's happening. A number of homicides, and of course we can't tell you how many, don't ever get reported for a number of reasons. In some cases, we know that trans and gender nonconforming folks are misgendered by the police. They may not have community members who, and friends and family members who will step up and say, this is who this person really was. And we just know that a lot of this goes under the radar, unfortunately. Really, we shouldn't get into a game of trying to compare this year to last year. When did the homicides happen? You know, it really doesn't matter. This is a huge crisis, and we have to take action now. We've known about this for years now, and we should have taken action last year and the year before, but it's not too late now.
Let's talk about the action we have seen in Dallas alone, right? There were 3 brutal attacks in the last several months, 2 of them fatal.
Yes.
The mayor came out and said, you know, this is unacceptable. He called it mob violence, the attack against Malaysia Booker. What have you seen from law enforcement in the way of a response? Are you satisfied with what you're seeing?
Well, we're not satisfied. We don't necessarily see a response that is saying this is more than just a trend. This is an epidemic in our society that needs to be addressed and taken seriously. And frankly, you know, more and more community members are reluctant to turn to law enforcement because members of the trans and gender nonconforming community, and in fact, members of the LGBT community, have experienced violence from the police. They don't trust the police.
Beverly, it's worth noting we're speaking on the same day the Trump administration has rolled back some health care protections for trans people. Earlier this week, there was another rule they put into place allowing shelters receiving federal funds to turn away trans people seeking services there. There's also the effort to push a transgender military ban here. What effect have all of these, even just proposals, had on the trans community?
Yeah. I mean, talk about a complete slap in the face. You know, the timing is really important to note here, because on the heels of these homicides where the community is already reeling, for the administration to one after the other release these proposed guidelines and rules this week, it's clear that they do not care about the trans and gender nonconforming community. And in fact, in the work that we've been doing in the city of New York and across the country, when we've brought together trans and gender nonconforming folks to talk about what are ways that we need our cities and our states and the nation to respond to this violence and to help prevent violence, people over and over again have told us we need housing. We need access to employment. We need better health care so that we can put ourselves in safer circumstances, and so we're not as vulnerable to violence that's happening in our community. And what does the administration do? Seek to strip away access to health care, to housing, to employment. You know, all of the things that people have actually articulated that they need to address the violence, the administration is trying to take away.
Beverly Tillery, Executive Director of the Anti-Violence Project. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tito. I'm with the GPAC's Stakeholder Engagement Committee. I also work with District 4 Public Health, and I wanted to introduce this and welcome everyone here. And thank you so much for coming to hear such an important topic that is affecting so many within the broader LGBTQ plus community, but more specifically, our trans brothers and sisters. So thank you for coming. And what I would like to do now is to introduce our wonderful facilitator today, Mr. Derek Bowe. Derek is a staunch advocate. Hi there, Derek. I'll give you a good introduction. Derek is a staunch advocate for many disenfranchised communities, most notably the trans community, as well as those other communities affected by HIV. He has founded a nonprofit organization that I hope you will share with us about by the name of Ubuntu Incorporated, whose mission it is to continually examine the ever-changing barriers of the trans community and strategize to create unique programs and practices to remove the many obstacles that severely impact trans people's ability to unlock their full potential. So everyone, I'd love for y'all to just tune in and enjoy this with Mr. Derek Bowe. So Derek, please enlighten us.
So thank you for that lovely introduction. My name is Derek. I am the Executive Director of Ubuntu Inc. here based out of Atlanta, Georgia, and we do a lot of work for the trans and gender nonconforming community. I don't want to take up too much time. I know we have a couple of really good panelists, and I want to get right into our discussion. So I'm going to bring up Trent and Elle if they are here, and allow Trent to go ahead and do a short introduction. Just say your name, your pronouns, let people know your title and what state you're based out of.
Hey, how you doing? Can everybody hear me? So make sure I'm good. All right, great. So I'm Trenton Johnson, more affectionately known as Coach Trent. My pronouns are he and him, king, all things male. I am the executive director and founder of Linked Together Connection Center, also known as Love Your New Creation. And I'm based here in Dallas, Texas. So happy to be here.
Come through Dallas. Oh, and we got Elle. Go ahead, Elle. Give us a short introduction. Just say your name, your pronouns, your title, and what state you're based out of.
Hi, oh my God. Hi, y'all. My name is El Halo. I am a bunch of things in community locally here in Milwaukee, and I am your Empower Her Summit facilitator for Black Trans Women Inc. I'm also the Inclusion Health Program Specialist for Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin, so I'm a senior consultant for their Gender Affirming Services Program, hormone replacement therapy program, and I'm also the chair of our state HIV board here. And so, yeah, it's lovely to be with y'all. Thank you.
Love that. And thank you both for joining us today. Really excited to have you both here. Full disclosure, I have some very different areas of the country are being represented. You have me and Trent here kind of in the deep south, and then you have Elle up in Milwaukee, so we'll get a really good perspective. I actually met both of them through the Black Trans Advocacy Conference, which is BTAC. If you're not familiar with it, I encourage you to go and check out their website and the different resources that they have to offer. Before we jump into the discussion, I do want to do some group agreements just so we can have a safe space for anybody who may be listening, and also for my co-facilitators. So number one, and this is really going to be when we get to the Q&A part, take space and make space. One diva, one mic. One diva or one devo and one mic, because we can sing together, but we can't talk together. This is virtual. We know that some of us feel like, we zoomed out, this, that, and the third. So step away and take care of yourself if you need to. If you need to, get up and pace while this is going on, please feel free to do that. Just take care of yourself. Make sure that you take the lesson and leave the characters, or some people say take the lesson and leave the story. We are privileged to be sitting here with some great individuals, and we don't ever want them to feel violated as if we took their information and then spread it out, because you might hear it, but just because you're consuming it doesn't mean it belongs to you. So respect the speakers and take the lesson and leave the story. If there's something that someone knows or doesn't know and you know, be sure to teach them and don't condemn. And always, in every space, we want to acknowledge our privilege and the perspectives that we speak from. So we've already done introductions. We're going to jump right into the conversation. So either one of y'all can start. But in 2021, the Human Rights Campaign reported 57 cases of people who died from anti-trans violence. What kind of effect has the rise, especially, 2021, 2022, what kind of effect has the rise of gender-based violence had on your environment, both work and personal?
I think for me that gender-based violence, and particularly we use the word trans misogynoir, and the specific types of sexual assault and harassment that I myself, as a Black woman of trans experience, have experienced, and that other trans women of color experience, is really how I got into prevention work and advocacy work. About 5-6 years ago, I had some small opportunities to start doing like panels and engagements kind of similar to this, and from there I pursued being a board member for our state HIV board, which is called the SAPG of Wisconsin, and I'm now the senior co-chair for that group, and the first trans woman to be co-chair of that group. And so I think that is definitely, I think that for femmes and for femme-bodied people, that assault and gender-based violence is something that you're always aware of, something that's always a back burner thought of how do I have enough self-awareness to keep myself from being in those situations to the best of my ability, and also how do I move forward, how do I heal and recover when I do have a situation that may be out of my control. I think that we have to definitely center that assault and harassment is never the person's fault. Like, it's not just because I'm trans, it's not just because I'm a girl, it's not just because I look a certain way or present a certain way, and that these are things that for us as trans people, I've dealt with sexual harassment and gender-based harassment my entire life, regardless of how I personally identified at that time. So even as a young person, and even years and years before I began my transition or a formal transition, I still was experiencing a lot of the same types of violence that I've experienced now, but definitely it being more hypersexualized and exasperated when you do transition as a trans woman, and just like, I don't know, higher frequency. And when we talk about patriarchy and privilege and what male privilege is, and you're in transition, and what is a part of losing that male privilege and that patriarchal privilege is that it's like I said, the frequency of that harassment now. Now that harassment comes in the workplace, it comes from other queer people, it comes from cis people, it comes from strangers, it comes from people in my family, it comes from friends and other people in community with me. And again, it's something that, regardless of how it's in fact impacting your environment or your space or your body, you have to learn how to move forward and how to, I don't know, you have to have your self awareness again, and just resiliency, and be able to push forward because we're still continuing to face those things.
Thank you, Elle. Thank you so much for that. It's very insightful. Trent, do you want to take a stab at that? Do you need me to ask the question again?
No, I'll just real briefly just say, I think for me, it just really amplified my work. I've been doing this work for quite some time, but last year, of course, dealing with being in Dallas, I was one of the individuals that knew Malaysia personally. Also, I knew China Doll, Gibson. So I know a lot of folks, unfortunately, but fortunately, right? I know a lot of people who we've lost to violence, and not just trans women, but some genderqueer folks, some non-binary folks, and trans men. But I think for me, the piece and the takeaway was, in my personal life and in my work, was to amplify that trans men and trans masculine identified folks are affected by trans violence as well. And I think as a trans male, I wanted to make sure that in my work, whether it was in the healing piece or in the coaching aspect, but that I made sure that I shined light on that trans men are also infected, that we do experience violence in other ways, and that I wanted to not highlight it in a way where it sounds like we're putting a light in and glorifying it, but to highlight that we do not need to be left out of this conversation. And so that's why I took my work to another level. I've shared space and been in leadership with Black Trans Advocacy as well, Black Trans Men Inc. and things of that nature. But I took it a little bit personal. When they say it don't hit till it hit home. And so when it affects you like that, you decide to take your work to another level.
Absolutely. And I want to start with you on the next question. I'm going to say a little bit, and then I'm going to kick the ball to you, then we'll kick it to Elle. So my next question is, what are some acts of violence that you've seen take place that people who are not necessarily directly impacted would perceive as violence? Me personally, I'm going to start and say one of the most damaging things that I have seen is people intentionally misgendering and dead naming people, and people will look at it and be like, oh, that's not violence. It is violence. It's just violence with words. It's microaggressive in nature, and it says a few things when you do it, which is, and I'm saying you as in if you are the person committing the offending act, what it says to us as trans people when you do things like dead name us, which is calling us a name that we're no longer known by, or when you are misgendering us, which is not referring to us with the pronouns that we identify with. What it says to us is that I know better than you. I know you better than you know yourself. I know this is who you say you are, but what's more comfortable for me matters more than, you living in your truth. That's what those things say to us. And they are, in fact, dangerous by nature. I've had to have talks with relatives and let them know that we're in the deep South still. We're in the deep South, and someone will hear you and they will catch my tea, i.e., understand that I'm trans, and they will hurt me based on how they feel. Nothing to do with, you're just trying to get comfortable or you just need some time. They will hurt me based off of something that you said, and that's not love. It is, in fact, a very violent act. It's kind of like a drop in the water, and I think most people don't understand it or see it in that way because they're not living it. So I'm gonna kick the ball to you, Trent.
Derek, that's a really, really great and loaded question. And as someone who works in the art of healing and what I call, this is Coach Trent talking, trauma-informed healing, right? I teach that violence to me is anything that makes me compromise my safety. And so if I have to feel that I'm unsafe at any point in time by an act that you have done to me, then it's violent. So that means if me and my parent is out to eat and they're refusing to use the right pronouns, and now I'm in a public space and someone is now made aware that I did not voluntarily make aware that I am transgender, you have now put me in an unsafe space. If you're in a Bible Belt and we're in a religious setting and someone is using religion against me to demonize who I am as a trans person, that's violent, because you're now taking who I am and saying who I am is not okay. It's wrong. And now you make me question myself mentally and emotionally, and that's violent. So anything in my eyes that would make me compromise my safety, make me start questioning my ability or inability to live authentically based on something that you view through your frosted paradigm, then is an act of violence towards me. Because if I'm not able to live authentically through my own view and don't have to change that because of how you view me, then to me that's violent. It doesn't just come through sexual assault or rape or even murder. It's something that challenges me mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. All of those things within our divine self would be my opinion.
That's absolutely 100% agree. And I think that's what we have to really shift the paradigm on, is getting people to understand that violence isn't always physical. I mean, I understand it because I don't know, I don't want to bring that into play, but I understand it because of the way that I grew up and where I grew up. The violence isn't always physical. Now, sometimes your words may be met with a physical action, because your words can also be perceived as violence. So those words might earn you a physical action. That at least where I came up. So I understood. So at a very young age, I learned that violence was not always physical. Go ahead, El. Will you mean to ask the question again?
Sure.
Okay. So the question is, what are some acts of violence that you have seen that somebody who is not directly impacted by them would not perceive as violent?
Thank you. I definitely will just pick up where y'all left off about misgendering and dead name at first. I call all of that the mental acrobatics. I didn't know, or I don't know how to address it, or how do I start the conversation, or what should I address you as, or I don't know. Sometimes even asking those questions can one be invasive and also be microaggressions and outing like Trey and Trey. Say it.
It's a whole bunch of trays.
Yeah, but definitely that can cause you to be outed. That can cause you to be put into a situation where you're unsafe. But also, I just call all of that the mental acrobatics. How long are we as trans people supposed to wait? I've been transitioning for 8 years with my family. How long am I supposed to wait? You need longer than 8 years?
Right, because it took me that long to figure it out. So you're
Just
not gonna get longer than me.
to adjust to a change that you knew was coming since I was like 6, though, you know.
But you know what,
And like that consciousness, that consciousness choice of when we are accepting of a new identity, of when we are accepting of a new gender marker or a new name. If my name was Buki off of 51st, my name would be Buki off of 51st. You know what I mean? And you wouldn't challenge that. And that's that privilege. That's you choosing. It's not you don't understand. It's not sure. It's so radical. It's so foreign. It's so unheard of. You never interacted with a trans person before that you can't adjust to it. You know that you, as a cis person, have the privilege and the proximity to the privilege to be able to deny that person's humanity when you choose to. For Black trans women specifically, I would say that another microaggression is there are a lot of microaggressions that are actually inside the community, inside the LGBT community. How we're siloed, how we're divided when it comes to the work, how we are pitted against each other. And like it's a way to have a healthy competition, and it's a way to have an unhealthy competition, or to force people that you are elevating through visibility platforms to have to navigate and deal with the way those things look to the community. And so even when you are working as hard as you can, or doing your best, or, you know what I mean, not being messy, or not, you know what I mean, trying to be there and support other people, you have to deal with how people are even looking at you being selected or picked for the work, that you're just being picked because of how you present your presentation as a trans person, that you're just being picked because of passability or that conversation, or or that you're only being picked because you're being tokenized, when in fact I feel that that internalization of what our organizations and the platforms are doing, I feel like that's internalizing it and making it our fault. To do all of those things, and all of those things are definitely microaggressions, and they cause for trans people and trans women to feel like they're left out of the larger community, and to not see our needs, and to not see our liberation as connected in the ways that we maybe should.
Thank you, El. And I was trying to jump in and say that whole oh well, we didn't know, and it's fine. Like, if that is the lie that you want to cling to and it helps you sleep at night, cool, I get it. Whatever. But also, like, just because you feel like, we didn't know, like, that doesn't give you then a license to come and disrespect us. Don't do that. Like, because then it becomes about you and about your comfort. I can remember when I first began to like kind of come out to those around me, or I should say, I don't like that phrase, coming out. When I began to make myself known, it was like, well, this isn't about you. And I'm like, then who is it about? Because when I would say, well, you can't lean on the fact I didn't know, I need time, you can't do that forever, then it was, you're being selfish, you can't make this all about you. And I'm like, well, then who is it about? Because I don't want to discount the fact that we have spent, everybody is constantly in a transition, whether you are preparing to level up at your job, whether you are losing weight, you are preparing for such and such diet, like, you are constantly in a transition, right? This is just one of many transitions in my life, right? So don't take that then and make it into like, oh, this isn't about you. Yeah, it's all about me, right? And this one is something that kind of, you can look back over your childhood and see the Easter eggs, and maybe everybody can't see them, but you can, and you certainly know them. And so it is hard to hear those things, but we also recognize that when we go through our transition, we absolutely take our family and our spouses with us through it. And there is a level of patience that's needed, because while we spend our whole lives hunting these Easter eggs and coming to this conclusion, we recognize that they need time, but you are also not going to use that time as a vehicle for disrespect. So yeah, I just feel like that needed to be said. So let me go on to the next question, if I can figure out how to work this MacBook. Hmm. Here we go. So, the next question is, and we'll kick it to you on this one, TJ, Trent. How can people show up for trans folks? Like, what does allyship look like to you?
You like these loaded questions,
I
huh?
love it.
I mean, for me, I think allyship is going to be different for each person depending on what they actually need. So for me, um, I'm a direct service provider, so it's like, if you got something we need, do it. And then also, if you know how, to speak up for us in your particular or respective areas, then do that. I think silence is violence. And so for me, if you're quiet and you have access, then you're not helping. If you are, creating a boundary, then you're not helping. If you are, standing in the gap but not creating a bridge, you're not helping. And so for me, that's what true allyship is. Everybody wants to wave the allyship, flag and hey, I got a gay friend. Hey, I got a trans friend. But what are you doing to create access for that transgender person? What are you doing at your corporation or your job to make sure their policies and procedures? Everybody joins, the DEI team or diversity and inclusion, and everybody's on the team. But what are you actually doing to make sure the team is sufficient for the folks coming in, right? And so for me, that's what true allyship is. It's not just volunteering at Pride and putting on your company T-shirt saying we had a booth. What are you doing all year long? Those are the things that true allyship for Trenton that matters. It goes way beyond just waving the ally flag and saying, hey, I know Trent. Yeah, you know Trent, but Trent needs someone to make sure that his folks got access, the ones that don't have health care, the ones that need somewhere to stay. And you got the resources, so help us get the resources too.
Absolutely love that. I'm gonna wait till the end to say mine because I actually got a list that's like this big.
Yeah, I cut it down because we can talk about this forever. I gotta let my sister talk too now.
I know how it is. Yes, we definitely. I appreciate you taking space and making space. That's what it's all about. So I'm gonna ask you the same question. And let's keep it to about 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, so that we can get to the next one. How can people show up for trans folks, and what does allyship look like to you?
I like to tell people we work with health providers a lot. So the first thing I like to tell people is if you're really a true ally, you should come from behind the white coat. And so what that means is you should be in the community that you're serving, even if it's not a direct community of yours. And for some of you, it might be a direct community of yours. And that's a great thing. And so I think when it is your community, like for myself, how I am an ally to the rest of the community is by sharing our stories, by amplifying our stories and initiatives and our work and our campaigns. And so I call all of that like being a witness. So sometimes you're just there. Sometimes the way that you help someone is by being a witness. That's kind of like what we say, like when you're in a relationship with a guy, right? Right. Not I. Anyway, when somebody in a relationship with a guy, right, they'll be like, I just want you to listen. I don't need you to try to be Captain Saber. Like, I don't know if I can finish that on here, but I don't need you to be Superman and to come try to save me. Like, I don't need a messiah. I need resources. I need access. I need a space to vent. I need a space to tell my story or to be heard or to be seen. And so sometimes you're there to be a witness. I think if you have financial ability to contribute to work that's being done and that is led by trans people, you should do that. I think that, again, coming from behind the white coat, give a girl a ride. Call the girls. Make sure the girl's okay. I keep, like, I don't know, another thing I personally do right is I keep my eye on like all the younger girls. Like I try to keep an eye on them. I don't really interact with them so much, But I try to keep an eye on them, and when I see them kind of struggling, I reach out to them. I just say, hey, what's up? I'm here to talk if you want to talk. And whether they take that up or not, you know what I mean? They know that someone is watching and someone isn't just watching to be exploitative or to be like, ooh, haha, look at this story or look at this trending thing or whatever. You know what I mean? So I think it can look a lot of different ways and that you should do stuff that's within your access, but directly helping people and supporting work financially is great. And again, just being there, walking the girls home, making sure the girl got home. You know what I mean? Like I go out with my guy friends a lot. You know what I mean? But they all drive. I don't drive. You know what I mean? They don't know what's happening to me once we leave the scene or whatever. So, just those kind of things I think could definitely help us in terms more of safety. And I think for trans women, I like to say that we need to be safer and move smarter. And we need our community and the people that love on us to be able to help us to do that.
Thank you, Elle. I'm trying to get in the camera. I don't know what's going on here. See, that's better. Thank you. That's better. Thank you to our executive producer. And yeah, all of those things definitely, we all we got. So it is definitely important that we look out for one another. We say that a lot. We all we got because it's true. We are often divided and put into silos and things like that. So it's not often that we get to come together in a space and just openly communicate what it is that we need. But I'm going to answer the question and say, here are some ways I'm going to answer it backwards. I'm going to say what allyship looks like to me. It's intentional, it's meaningful, and it's effective. You can really see the impact. And how you achieve that is by showing up for trans folks. You show up by attending CAB meetings, community advisory board meetings, attend community events. And this is like fundraisers, family fun days. If there's a ball, if there's a pageant going on in your area, like 9 times out of 10, whoever you know already knows who's connected to the event and they can get you connected or whatever, but show up and just be in the space with other trans people because a lot of times people will be like, well, I don't know any trans people. That's because you're not showing up. That's why you don't know any. Because I guarantee you've met at least one before. Donate to your local community-based organizations. I serve as the executive director of Ubuntu Incorporated, and Trent serves as the executive director of Link. I want to say, Elle, you are affiliated with Sheba, but these are organizations that have boots on the ground. We are, like Elle mentioned, checking in with people. That's not easy. It's not easy work. It's a labor of love. So that means that 2-3 o'clock in the morning, she's getting phone calls and talking people off ledges. And that's like waking up out of my sleep, even though I know I got to go to work the next day. CNN recently did a special on some people, Kayla Gore, Zakia McKenzie, and Tori Cooper, I believe, were 3 of the people that they featured. But these people have been in community for years with boots on the ground, walking the beat to make sure that people have like a hot meal, HIV and STI prevention items and things like that. And finally we're getting to spotlight some of that and really give these people their flowers and access to maybe even more resources. But donate to local CBOs, because a lot of times these boots on the ground are just barely scraping by, but they're still getting the work done. And with that being said, volunteer at your local CBOs. Reach out and see what we need, because we always need something. We are largely dependent upon community support, and sometimes that looks like volunteering. If you've got accounting skills, marketing and media, writing, we need that. I could say Ubuntu needs that. And
Agreed.
Even if you don't have a skill, you need it too, Trent.
We need it too.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, so Link needs it too. And so even if you don't have a skill, we always need volunteers. We always trying to figure out how to go feed somebody or something. Sometimes time is the most valuable thing you can give. Another way to show up is showing up and being silent. Just listen. Don't speak over us. Don't invalidate our experiences. Don't try to tell us we're being too sensitive or this or that. We are the experts in our own experience. So show up and listen, and don't speak over us, because that's not allyship. That's something else masquerading as allyship, but it's not allyship. And also, nothing about us without us. You can't create space for trans people without trans people involved in the creation of that space. And that means representation. That means trans men, trans women, non-binary folks, and gender non-conforming folks. That's all of us. And this phrase is often most associated with the end of the ending the HIV epidemic, and trying to get equitable healthcare for people living with HIV and AIDS. But it applies here too. Compensate us adequately. Keep in mind the cost of living and that it's going up every day. And just everyday life in general, we need to live too. We want y'all to learn, but our time, our expertise, and our experience does have value. And we need people who are in allyship with us, in community, in kinship, and whatever kind of ship you want with us. We need you to recognize it. Hire trans people. Hire trans people and create a path to leadership. Don't stick them in and let them just be your token trans person. Create an opportunity for them to elevate themselves. And recognize that trans people want a hand up, not a handout. And I'm stepping off my soapbox. So back to Trent and Elle. How can people get in touch with you and stay engaged with the work that you do?
You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at El Halo, and LinkedIn. Yeah. I'm working on a website. I've been doing business coaching and engaging more work as a consultant. So I've been working on a website that I hope to have finished and released during the summertime. So we look forward to that, and I'll finally have like a place to put all of my work, my advocacy work, and my creative work. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. So thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Are there any kind of there's no special projects or anything that you want to lift up right now?
Sure. For BTWI, for Black Trans Women Inc., we are actually having an event on the 21st, which is our Trans Manifest talent show, which the Trez, y'all will know that as the Trans Manifest talent show that they have every year at the conference, but they're having it virtually. So you can definitely look forward to that this month. We'll definitely be having whole coalition events for Pride. And I am doing weekly live chats for Black Trans Women Inc. And this week I'll be talking about reproductive justice. I'm going to actually try to get that finished and put out today if possible. So definitely, like I said, follow me Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and you can definitely find that information and the other things I'm working on. So thank you.
Thank you, Elle, and I appreciate you. I'm gonna ask you to stick around for we have Q&A in a few minutes. But Trent, talk about you. Talk about the work that you do. Lift up whatever that you're working on right now.
Absolutely. So you can definitely follow me. Website is linktogether.org. That's LYNC, the number 2, together, GETHER.org. If you type that in on any social media platform, we will pop up. That's Facebook, that's Instagram. You'll find me there. You can also follow me, Coach Trent Lamar, on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok. I'm on there too. Y'all gotta come follow me. It's Coach Rev Trev. Also, I'm doing a lot of things in the community. So you need business coaching, you need trauma coaching, you need a reverend, you need somebody just to help you, to coach you through life, to get you from where you are to where you're next. Holler at me. All things love, I got you covered. What's going on now? I'm getting ready to graduate from Monica Roberts Freedom School. Yay! So that's getting ready to happen. I'll be in Florida in a couple of weeks. I have Dallas Teen Pride here in Dallas on June 4th. So we'll be there vending and looking out for the youth. We got clothes and food. We're going to be taking care of them. I'll be in Vegas doing Truth Talks with Coach Trent. You can follow that podcast. Type in Truth Talks with Coach Trent. I'm on Apple Podcasts, any podcast streaming platform. We're going to Vegas for Pride. So we all over the place. Follow the website. Just follow me on social media, and we'll keep you linked in. That's what we say. Stay linked in and stay connected. Thank you for letting me be here. I appreciate it.
No, I love that. So happy to have you. And so happy to hear all of the great things that you're working on. I'm looking forward to seeing it. Right. Mariah says word, right? And so, just to shamelessly plug my own organization, I am the executive director of Ubuntu Inc. We're based here out of Atlanta, Georgia. We have our group coming up next week on the third Wednesday of the month. It is from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. It is for trans men. It's called Just the Fellas. We have our group for spousal support that meets the spouses of trans men that meets every week on Wednesday. These groups meet virtually. I believe that it is from 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time, if I'm not mistaken. What else do I want to say? I want to lift up our housing program. I feel like I don't talk about it enough. We have a transitional housing program for trans men. And I wrote some notes here. Let me get that up. So I want to talk about our transitional housing program that we have for trans men. And I want to talk about it because we're talking about intentional allyship and what it looks like and acknowledging our privilege. And so we thought it was important to have a program to where people could come in and they didn't have to pay rent. They don't have to pay utilities. You're not responsible financially for anything throughout your duration in our program. We provide food. We have a food pantry that donates to us, so we're able to provide food for people so they're not like hungry and trying to figure out what their next meal is while they're there. There's access to public transportation, and there's also the access to being connected to community resources. We partner with many different organizations, ranging from ones that deal with HRT, hormone replacement therapy, and just providing holistic healing, food pantries, all different types of stuff. So, there's that opportunity there for the guys in the house to get connected to those things. And the application or the referral form for our housing program is on our website under housing resources. If you go to ubuntuinc.org, you will find that under housing resources. You can also follow us, and if you have any questions, send us a message on Facebook or Instagram at symbol UBUNTUINC, so at Ubuntu Inc. But yes, support us, support our housing programs. Support us so that we can continue to make programs that are sustainable and accessible for people in our community who do need them. And that's all I got. So we can move into a few minutes of Q&A if there are questions. It does not look like there are questions. Okay. Doesn't look like there are questions. But I would say, Trent, we'll just talk until we get a question. One of the things that I have been actively working, myself and a few other organizations have been kind of working to dispel, is this invisibility myth about trans men, right? Because we're here. We've always been here. We are present in the work. Now, we may be overlooked, but invisible we are not, and I think Carter Brown is one of the people who was like, and you were there when he said it. He said, with this learning yourself, we are getting to rewrite the narrative of what it means to be a Black trans man. And so I just think it's so important that we do away with this myth of invisibility. How do you feel about that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, shout out to Carter Brown. That is one of the organizations that honestly I got a lot of my footing in. Many people know me as Mr. Black Trans Dallas, Mr. Black Trans International. I got a lot of my heavy advocacy work started right in the heart of me coming to Dallas. I'm originally a New York native, so people know that when I came to Dallas, that's what I needed. I didn't see anybody that looked like me, so that invisibility thing was really a problem for me. When I started my transition, I didn't know where to go. I didn't know who to talk to. My first person that I ever talked to about transitioning was Teak Milan. That's my mentor, my number one person, right? And we were in the same city at the time, same area. But to answer your question, I think it really just starts with us being a little bit more vulnerable to share our stories. I know that this whole thing of wanting to be stealth, and I respect those that want to be stealth and need to be under the radar, for safety and things like that, because I am huge about safety. Do what you have to do to be safe. But I do understand that in order for us to change that narrative, that we have to be willing to pass on our stories and be able to say, hey, I'm here and this is what it looks like and this is how we do this. Because how did our ancestors come before us? How do our the folks that are older than us and things of that nature, how did they exist? Because they told their stories. And so if we stop telling our stories, then what happens to the generations that come after us? And that is how history, shout out to Auntie Monica, that is how historians are birthed. We have to tell our story. If we stop telling our story, then our history dies. And we can't do that because we are history being made right now.
I love that. Thank you so much. Absolutely. We do. We have to continue to speak up. And what do people like to say? We have to continue to speak truth to power, right? The people with the resources, and I said this, and I want to say it again. Resources can look a lot of different ways. Sometimes if you can get more publicity, that's a resource. Sometimes if you are a heck of a grant writer, that can be a resource to you. So resources look differently to different community-based organizations, but we are the boots on the ground. We need all of them because that's the thing that keeps the organizations running and sustainable. And when I talk about sustainability is important because that's access. How many times have you gone to get something and they're like, you know what? We don't do that anymore. And then you find out that the reason that they don't do it anymore is because enough people didn't use it, but enough people didn't use it because enough people didn't know about it. So again, resources look differently. It can be access, it can be opportunity. Okay. Does most of the violence perpetrated on trans people come from relationships? I'm gonna take a first crack at that, and I'm gonna say thank you for your question. And I'm gonna say no. I think a lot of times the media would have us to believe that trans women are tricking people, because they like to be able to use like the panic defense and things like that. But I would say, from my experience, no. Sometimes it comes from when you say relationships. I mean, are you talking about familiar relationships? Are you talking about romantic relationships? Because I have experienced more violence from my familiar relationships, and other places than I've never experienced violence in my romantic relationship. So either one of y'all take a crack at that.
I definitely have experienced violence in what we call interpersonal relationships, so romantic or sexual or dating relationships. But I definitely also have experienced a lot more violence from strangers and from people that I was in proximity to that may not be someone I have a direct relationship with. And again, like family members. And we know that just like with cis women, trans women are generally killed more so by people that they know than by a random one-time hookup or a random I just went to the club and I just hooked up with a guy and he ain't know or something like that. A lot of us, y'all did touch on stealth, and I touched on what passivity is earlier in the conversation, but there definitely are people who are stealth, and that's their right. And even myself, as a binary presenting, out, visible trans woman, and a public figure in that way, I still am trying to navigate like breaking the habit of putting that of I don't know, labeling myself for that as when I'm pursuing a new relationship or I don't know, and talking to someone, introducing myself. And it's a challenge. You know what I mean? Is it like, when is it? Again, we call it the mental acrobatics. I call it mental acrobatics. When is the right time to disclose? And then if I do that in a public setting, if I do that on the street, if I do that while someone's catcalling me or something, is that going to put me in danger when I do that? And even with those factors, 9 times out of 10, I'm too scared to not tell somebody. Even if it looks weird, I will tell somebody on the spot. I don't know, to this day, like 8 years in to transitioning, I still will blurt it out almost uncontrollably right away when a guy or a person is interested in me or trying to pursue me. And you know what I mean? Sometimes they'll even tell you like that's not necessary or whatever. And of course it's not necessary, because we know what passability is. We know what we look like, what we don't look like, and even the most passable person can be clocked, and your passability or your living in self doesn't protect you from violence or protect you from those things. But 9 times out of 10, the panic defense and the myth of trans women tricking men is a myth. 9 times out of 10, very few women do that. Very few trans people or non-binary people do that. Most of the times we do disclose. Most of the times we do disclose early. When I'm talking to people online, I'm not even giving you my number until I know that you know. So I like to tell people I don't have to trick nobody. So
Yeah.
I don't know. But I do think that it's a myth that only in romantic relationships is where we're experiencing the violence. But a lot of times it is family people. Like there's this one story of this girl named Claire Legato from DC from 2019, 2020. And she was 16 and her stepfather killed her off of fighting with her mom over some tax money. And you know what I mean? On the surface, anyone looking at that, you just see this young girl who was killed, and they would assume any number of the things that people assume about trans women and about why that might have happened. But in truth, she was in an unsafe situation, and the man chose to kill her. And was somebody that had access to her, and she was a minor. Like, she shouldn't even have been in that position.
Thank you, Elle. That's a whole lot, and thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your personal experiences. I do want to kick it to TJ. Trent, I'm sorry. You know I lovingly know you as TJ. I'm gonna kick it to Trent right quick so he can respond, because I know he's got a hard stop time in about 3 minutes.
To be honest, I'm just gonna. You can go to another question if you want to, just so we can make sure we don't miss anybody.
So
I see a lot of them popping up.
Cool. So I'm gonna jump to Alexandra Brown's question, which is, how do you navigate a teen who wants to transition from male to female? And I'm gonna say, before Trent even says anything, you start by loving them. And I know, and I'm sure that you already do, but that's where you start. You start with love. Go ahead, Trent.
Yeah, I was actually hoping we got to this question before I got out of here, because I was that kid that didn't receive that love. I was that kid that was like told there's something wrong with you. You can't be true to yourself. So I would definitely say start with love, and just really allow the child to flourish into themselves authentically. So whatever resources, whether if there's a pride center or a resource center like in your local area that happens to have a youth group or something to that effect. I know here in Dallas we do, even my organization, we host groups and things like that, just something where they can be around their peers. It's always good to have somebody around you that looks like you, so we can kind of talk these things through. But support, and love is always the answer.
If you need to duck out now so you can jump to your other meeting, ain't nobody gonna be mad at you. We appreciate you.
That's why I went off for a minute. I got you. We good.
You good? Okay.
I'll let you know.
Yeah. Thank you. So I would say, start with love and just let them know that you are loved, you are special, you are valuable. That's first. And then realize, I think what happens a lot of time when people hear the word transition, and I'm not saying you, Alexandria, what I'm saying is people hear the word transition and they jump immediately to medical. And the first parts of transition are not medical, they're social. They begin with things like seeing what pronouns fit, seeing what names fit, seeing what clothes fit, seeing how I want to express this newfound part of myself. So I would say start there, and just listen. just listen. Go ahead, TJ. Trent.
And also, if you do, if it is a thing with clothing resources or anything like that, you can reach out to my organization. We do offer clothes. It's not there's no fee or anything. So I know sometimes working through the nuances of dysphoria in clothing, especially with teenagers going into school environments. I do a lot of work with schools here. That's a big thing with teens. So if you do need assistance with that, you can definitely reach out. Go to our website, just send a message, and someone will contact you, and we can kind of work through those things with you if you need assistance. Just wanted to offer that.
Want to offer? Never mind. I ain't gonna say that. I was gonna say this. I'm gonna throw a little shade, but it's not really shade. I just want to lift up the fact that we do need resources. When he pointed at himself, he said someone will contact you. It's because we're literally doing everything in our organizations. We need more resources.
You see how I did that? I said someone will contact you, but somebody caught the shade. I was like, somebody will contact you, but that was like hint, hint. Just send the email, and we'll get to you.
You know what I'm saying? So send them a cute little donation too, or just share the website or something. But Alexandra, I hope that answered the question. I think you and I are friends on Facebook, so if you want to send me a message, I can actually connect you with Trent too. I don't know if you put your email, but put your email in the comments again, Trent.
I'd like to add to that question. For the teen, for the young person. I definitely think that listening is the best thing you can do at the beginning. I actually have two young people that I'm a chosen family mom to, that are young and transitioning, and they're transitioning 7 years in their life before I started my transition, before the age where I started. And so, for me, it's definitely something new, you know what I mean? Like that I haven't experienced or walked someone through, and their needs and their desires and their, the goals and the way they see their lives are definitely different than mine, and they have different backgrounds than myself. But they know themselves better. I told my mom that I was a girl twice in life before transitioning. And like Trey said, transition is largely social, but I also said it is spiritual. I said it really starts with your mental and your spiritual personally, and you walking in that and finding the space of who you are, and then the manifestations are the physical and the social, right? And so really when we transitioned, like I said, I started at 25 8 years ago. So but really I really started when I was a little kid, and I was having a lifelong experience of not knowing who I really was and where I really fit, or where I should even try to be on a spectrum or in a lens, right? And so I had to find those things. And so I think that one, even if my mom or my family didn't embrace that I told them that I was a girl when I was a young person, if I would have not let that deter me, I probably would have started sooner. I do think that we all start when we need to. I think that it happens in the time that person needs. And for instance, like even again with my young kids, I know that there's things that they're going through that I couldn't have handled at that age. You know what I mean? And just in terms of just the whole spectrum of the whole transition. And so, just listening and really listening, not just listening, like letting them get it out, but listening to understand, and listening to accept and to sit with. Sometimes you don't have to accept something. Sometimes you don't need a yes man. Like they're not coming to you as kids and as parents or as adult figures. They don't need a yes man. They don't want you to just be like, boom, yeah, you can do whatever you want. You can go do whatever you want. They don't want that. They want structure. They want advice. They want mentorship and fellowship, stewardship. But you can't have any of those things if it's just that, oh, because you're gay, we're not having a conversation at all. Oh, because you're trans. Oh, because you questioning or queer, we're not having a conversation at all, period. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, even as an adult, even 8 years in, it's still a struggle for me to discuss things that I'm dealing with in my life or in the life or the lifestyle with my family and with my mom. And even though like I know I have the space to do so now, it's still hard to do it because we've never done it. Because ever since I was a little kid, it's just been, okay, I'm gonna just keep all the gay stuff to myself. I'm gonna keep all the queer stuff to myself. Those things are private. Those things aren't for my family to digest and to know. And so just think of how much struggling any young person has to do when their parents aren't a part of their decision making and their resource in decision making as they get older.
Thank you. You know, you said so many important things, and one of the things I want to lift up is Alexandria's question. Is like it didn't mean to be, but it was a loaded question because it's going to allow us to touch on a lot of things, right? And I want to say from personal experience, if you decide it's too much for me, I don't want anything to do with you. If you're going to live your life this way, this, that, and the third, if you make that decision now, prepare to live with it. Prepare to live with it, because we may decide that we cannot live with your intolerance and your hate, your whatever it is. And I'm speaking, I'm telling a little bit of my story in this way. And I don't mind disclosing, I haven't talked to my birth mother in years, and I am okay with that because I would rather be a whole person instead of in pieces, you know. And it's not, you know, I from my talking to other people, when you have when a person has a child, it's very much like your heart walking around outside of your body. And so I can't imagine telling this piece that came from you, this person that came from you, I don't want anything to do with you because you've now embraced yourself and I can't understand it. Wouldn't you much rather work to try to understand? Wouldn't you rather lead with love than to not have access to this person at all anymore? Because once you say, like, you know, words are really like toothpaste. So once you say those very hurtful things and once you make those hurtful actions, you can't take them back. So, you know, think very hard about the things that you're going to say and do, and lead with love. And don't you know, you call it the mental acrobatics. It happens like that. Like your parents and people try to talk you out of it as if you're making this like horrible, you know, it's like I'm growing into myself, but they're telling me I'm not myself. It's a lot to deal with. It really is truly mental acrobatics. But I'm gonna jump to this last question. Um, with the violence that our trans brothers and sisters and all in between, so all TGNC people, trans and gender nonconforming people face, how can we best, how can we be the best ally and help young trans individuals feel comfortable to be able to facilitate any assistance they need? Trent, you want to go with that one?
I think it kind of a little bit to piggyback off of the first question we just had. I think that it's just really, I think when helping someone feel comfortable is first and foremost asking people what they need, not asking ask folks what they need. I always say asking, like, no, you're
Mm-hmm.
not asking nobody, but to know what I need, you need to have a conversation with me. And if I'm not in a position, sometimes even as an adult, at 40 years old, there's times where I know I don't look like 21, thank you. I know that sometimes I still don't always know what exactly I need. And I need to be able to sit in that and know that it's okay not to be able to articulate everything that I need in that moment. But I think having a conversation to know exactly what they need. I think Derek said it earlier, and even in the conversation, we've said it time and time again. It can be as simple as right now, all I know is that I don't want to be called this. I want to be called this. I don't want to use this pronoun. I want to use that pronoun. It can be as simple as starting right there. And I know for some folks that's major, but for other folks it's simple. Whatever level it is, from 0 to 1,000, meet that person right there. And I think just understanding and having that conversation with them will be the start. Another thing I want to lift up is that teens deserve more than 5 and 6 hours during Pride. I think that it's not fair that we get a whole weekend or a whole week, and then we have like this cutout that says Teen Pride or Youth Pride is going to be from 11 to 4 or 11 to 8. So in your area, lift up that they deserve more than that little bit of time. They deserve to have more than just a couple of hours. They matter too, because I knew at 7 years old that I was somebody different, and I deserve to be able to express that for more than 4 or 5 hours. You know what I mean? So let's lift that up too.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, they absolutely need more because when you were that age, you needed more. You know, you would have been look, we would have been glad to come to Pride. I remember my first
Listen,
Pride, I was like this
baby,
because it
I
was
would
a
have
movie
been
theater
showing
there.
out. You hear me?
Yes, I remember my wife bring she's my wife now, but she brought me to my first Pride, and I remember being so because I wasn't out yet. I was just trying to hide. I was like, I don't want no news cameras to see me, and I'm like, and now I look back on, I'm like, you really thought you was important, didn't you? But it is they need designated spaces because I was only I know I was only what 18 at the time, but teenagers need designated spaces. And something that one of my mentors, Nishana Curry, has taught me is that like it takes a really special person to work with that age group, especially special people who have the same lived experience. Give us a chance to just sit down and talk to them. And sometimes I remember the first time I met TJ, and I met Carter Brown, and I had a chance to sit and talk with Sebastian. It made me feel like now, mind you, I'm a young tender. They all older than me, but it made me feel like, oh, I'm gonna be okay. Oh, these guys look like me. Oh, like it made me feel so safe. And so I think that, adding to what you said, Trent, they need spaces, intentional spaces curated just for them and nobody else, so that they can see, oh, okay, I'm gonna, because people will tell us like that ain't no kind of life to live. You gonna die, things like that. And so when you see somebody who looks like you and they've gotten older, it's like, oh, honey, there's nothing I can't do. So it makes you feel so safe. Um, yeah. Are there any other questions?
I'll piggyback on that as well. I think that again, listening to them is a really good place to start. When we talk about like the gay agenda, the trans agenda, or the inclusion and representation in like media, like we've been talking about the Proud Family a lot, we've been talking about trans people in sports a lot, different things like that, transgender kids, transgender youth. I think that one, y'all have to recognize again where privilege is in those conversations. Like Trey said, people automatically jump to it's a medical transition. That's not a reality for a lot of kids of color. That may be a reality to sometimes some kids from a certain environment or background, or some kids that are white or white passing, even, right? Like that might be possible for them, and we've seen that. We've seen that on TV. We've seen that with I Am Jazz and different things like that. And while those things are beautiful and necessary in the fight to make legislation, to make policy, to build healthcare practices that can support our youth, that's not a reality. My kids are um, 2 and 3 years apiece into their own individual transitions, started individually and transitioning differently than each other. And although they're siblings with each other and they're very close, they're still very different. One is non-binary, and one is a trans girl, and they're both still my kids, and they both still look up to me and do identify on the spectrum of trans women and trans feminine. And so, it's definitely that I have to listen to them. Even as a trans woman, I have to listen to them about what their needs are and those things like that. But again, just automatically feeling like transitioning means the privilege of being able to have a medical transition or to sustain a medical transition is a privilege. And that's not the reality for most of our youth. They're doing it either without hormones or with black market hormones or different things like that. And those, again, your proximity or you being included with it, those are the things that is going to determine if the transition is safe for that child and safe for that person. And so if you can contribute to that in a safe way, do that. But I say, don't just automatically shut them down or feel like they want to change their body when they're just trying to start expressing themselves.
Thank you so much, L. Absolutely. So in short, listen, listen. And listen for clarity and not to respond. And show up where you can. we do want to respect people's time, so we have about like 40 more seconds. I'm gonna kick it to TJ. You want to make a closing statement?
I mean, in honesty, I think this was awesome. Thank you for the opportunity, to everyone behind the scenes working, to you, Derek, for reaching out, to allowing El Halo. Thank you. I'm glad to see you. Shout out to everything you're doing. I'm just excited to be here. Y'all know all things community. I'm here. You all know where to reach me. If you don't, I've been kind of tapping on the sideline on the Facebook. My name is there. Just reach out. Whatever I can do to amplify Black trans voices and the voice of Black trans men, I'm around and I'm here for it. So thank you again for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. El?
Thank you. Again, you can find me on social media at El Halo, and I appreciate being able to sit with my brothers today on this Friday. Yes, it's good to see y'all and be in fellowship with y'all. So thank y'all.
And thank you to John, Tito, and Reggie for having us today. We really appreciate you, and feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you.